When trust shattered, the truth behind my wife's affair, and its devastating impact. Hey, my name's James, and I'm 32. A month ago, if someone asked me how things were going, IDV said I was living the dream. I had a great job as a software engineer and a nice house in the suburbs. Most importantly, I was married to Emily, who was the love of my life. We'd been together 8 years and married 5. She was my best friend and the person I couldn't wait to get old with. For our 5th anniversary, we decided to do something special. We've both been through a lot, and I wanted to make it memorable. So I booked us a weekend at a cozy cabin in the mountains. It was a place we went on dates when we first started seeing each other, and it had a lot of good memories. I thought it'd be perfect to look back on the past and plan for the future. The drive to the cabin was pretty chill, with Emily being pretty quiet. I thought she might just be tired from work, since we'd both been pretty busy lately. Me, I was knee-deep into a big project at work, and she'd been working long hours as a nurse at the local hospital. But something about her quietness felt off, so I tried to brush it off, thinking she'd relax once we got to the cabin. That night, we had some wine and dinner under the stars, chatting about the early days of our relationship. We laughed about that first awkward date of ours, and when we got lost hiking in the mountains, it felt like we were rediscovering each other all over again. For a bit, everything seemed fine. But the next morning, we were sitting on the porch, drinking coffee and watching the sunrise. Emily turned to me, her face serious. My heart dropped, knowing something was up. She said, "James, I need to talk to you about something." I tried to stay calm, but my brain was going a million miles an hour. Was she upset? Was there something wrong in our relationship? Then she said, "I'm pregnant." At first, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. We talked about starting a family, even though we hadn't been actively trying. Maybe this was the news she'd been nervous to tell me. But then her next word struck me like a punch to the gut. "It's not your baby," she said. My brain froze. How could that be? Emily was my wife, the person I trusted more than anyone. It had to be a mistake, a terrible misunderstanding. "I didn't want this to happen," she continued, with tears streaming down her face. "I've been seeing someone else, and the baby's theirs." I felt like I'd been hit in the gut. The air left my lungs, and I couldn't form words. How long had she been cheating on me? Who was this guy? Why hadn't I seen the signs? All I managed to say was, "Why?" Emily was crying her eyes out, but her voice sounded empty. "This wasn't supposed to happen. I never wanted to hurt you, James. I still love you, but what?" My head was spinning. I wanted to shout, demand answers, make sense of how my wife, the person I loved and respected, could do this to me. But instead, I just sat there, staring at the sunrise, which seemed cruel and unforgiving in its coldness. I didn't know what to say or do. This was supposed to be our special day, celebrating how far we'd come together. But instead it felt like everything was falling apart. Emily kept talking, her words jumbled and confused, trying to explain herself. She said she wasn't sure how she felt, that it was all a big mistake. She begged me not to leave her, but I couldn't stay. But all I could think about was how I'd already lost her. It's not just about cheating, it's more like a betrayal I can't even comprehend. She made a choice that changed everything, and now I need to figure out how to move on. The rest of that day was a complete blur. After Emily dropped the bombshell, I just didn't have it in me to keep up the charade. How could I really? We packed up and left the cabin way early. The drive home felt like the longest 3 hours of my life. She tried to talk a couple of times, but I just couldn't respond. All I heard was the hum of the engine and the occasional sniffle. When we got home, I went straight to the guest room. I couldn't stand the thought of lying next to her. She didn't try to stop me or say anything as I closed the door behind me. For once, I was glad. I needed time to process it all. How do you even process something like that? How can you deal with the fact that your wife is pregnant with someone else's baby? I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling and reliving everything that had happened over and over in my mind. I couldn't believe I hadn't seen it coming. How could I be so blind, so caught up in my own world that I didn't see my wife slipping away? Looking back, I could see the signs, the late nights she spent at the hospital, the weekends she said she needed sleep, and how distant she seemed for months. I thought she was just stressed from work, but now I realize it was something else. She wasn't just tired, she was cheating. Who was the other guy? Did I know him? Was he also married? The questions were spinning in my head, like a tornado, each one worse than the last. No answer would ever satisfy me about how she could do that to me. I didn't get much sleep that night. I just lay there feeling numb and broken. Every now and then, my phone would buzz with texts from friends and family wishing us a happy anniversary. But I couldn't bring myself to reply. What could I say, really? Thanks, but my wife just told me she's having another man's baby. It was almost funny if it didn't hurt so much. The next morning, there I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at my untouched coffee. Emily was on the couch, curled up with red, puffy eyes. The silence was so heavy, it was like it was suffocating us. Finally, she whispered, "James, I'm sorry." I didn't know what to say. There was just nothing I could think of. After what felt like forever, I finally got the courage to ask the burning question. "So, how long has this been going on?" Emily winced, like the question physically hurt her. She admitted, "About 6 months. 6 months. Half a year." She'd been cheating for half a year, and I was in the dark. I felt like an idiot, a wave of anger rushing through me. I forced myself to stay calm. "And who is he?" My voice was cool and distant. She hesitated, then finally said, "His name's Eric. He works at the hospital too. A doctor, of course. Someone she sees all day. Someone she's with when I'm not there." I wondered if they laugh at me behind my back, if they exchange secret glances. The thought made me sick. "Do you love him?" I blurted out before I could stop myself. Emily looked at me, her face filled with guilt and shame. "It wasn't because of love," she said. "I don't know why it happened. It just did, and I'm sorry. I wanted to believe her. I wanted it to be a mistake, a one-night stand that went wrong. But then there was the pregnancy. That changed everything. It was no longer just an affair we could hide. Now there was a child involved, and it wasn't mine. I need some time," I told her, getting up from the table. She looked at me desperately. "James, don't leave me. I don't want you to go," but I stood firm. "I just need some space to think," I repeated. I wasn't strong enough to argue or deal with my emotions. So I grabbed my keys and walked out of the house. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't stay in that house, not then. Not with Emily. As I drove around the city aimlessly, my mind raced with thoughts of the future. Should I divorce her? Try to work things out? Could I even forgive her for what she'd done? I pulled over to the side of the road and put my head down on the steering wheel, just trying to breathe through the pain. Everything in my world had just been shaken up, and I didn't know how to put it all back together. I don't even know how long I sat in my car that day. When I finally gathered myself, the sun had already gone down. The sky was all warm and pretty, but it didn't match how I felt. I was stuck on a loop of questions. Where did I go wrong? Why did I miss the signs? Is there any chance to fix things? So, I decided to go see my friend Kyle. We went to college together, and he's always honest. He doesn't sugarcoat things. He's the guy I need right now. Someone who will tell me the truth, even if it hurts. I knocked on his door, and he answered with a big grin. But when he saw my face, the grin fell. "What's up, man? You look terrible," he said. I took a deep breath and said, "I need to talk to you about something." My voice was shaking a little. He led me inside and offered me a drink. We sat on the couch, and I started explaining what had happened. He was listening intently, not interrupting me. When I was done, he took a deep breath and said, "I get it. Let's work through this together." "Yeah, I'll take 2, I mumbled as Kyle went to the kitchen. When he came back with the beers, I took a big gulp before finally telling him about the affair and the pregnancy news. As I talked, all the details came out, and it felt like I was living the nightmare again. Kyle was quiet for a minute, processing everything. Then, just like I expected, he couldn't keep his thoughts to himself. "Man, that's fucked up on so many levels," he said. "Tell me about it," I replied. "What do you want to do? Stay with her or go? You have options, but none of them are easy. I just didn't know what to do. One part of me wanted to just pack up and run, just leave it all behind and never look back. But then there was another part of me that still loved Emily and didn't want to give up on us yet. We'd been together for 8 years, so how could I just toss it all aside? I was shaking my head and saying, "Man, I don't know, Kyle. My mind's all messed up right now." Kyle leaned back in his chair and nodded, thinking. "Look," he said, "I understand how you feel about Emily. It's possible for people to move on after stuff like this, but it's a big maybe. You gotta decide if you can really forgive her, and if you can handle bringing up another person's kid." That last question really got me. I hadn't thought about that before. A kid. If I stuck with Emily, it would be like raising someone else's baby. Every time I saw the kid, would I think about her betrayal? It would be a constant reminder of what she did. "I don't know if I can do that," I said, looking down at my bottle. But then again, I didn't want to just leave. Kyle leaned in, more serious than usual. "Listen, James, you don't need to decide right away. Whatever you choose, Don't let fear or guilt control you. Your life is yours. You deserve happiness. But happiness seems so far away right now. A few days ago, I thought I had it all, but now it feels like a dream. We sat in silence for a while, the gravity of the situation hanging heavy between us. Kyle let me be, and I was grateful for that. Sometimes you just need to have someone there with you, without them trying to fix everything. After a few hours, I left to go home, not ready to face Emily yet, but knowing it was inevitable. When I got there, the house was dark and empty. It looked so different from the way it used to be. I took a deep breath and walked in. Emily was at the kitchen table, staring at her phone. She stood up when I entered, with a worried look on her face. "James, are you okay?" she asked, for what felt like the 100th time. No, I wasn't. I didn't feel okay at all, but I didn't want to talk about it. She sighed. "I'm sorry, James. I know I've said that a lot, but I really am sorry." I just shook my head. "It's not enough, Em. Your apologies aren't enough." Her eyes were welling up with tears as she stepped closer to me. "I'll do anything to fix this, James. Anything at all. Don't give up on us, please." I wished I could believe her. Wished there was some magic solution to save our relationship. But the truth was more complicated. Trust had been broken, and rebuilding it seemed impossible. "I just need some time," he said, using the same old line. She nodded, swiping her tears away. "Take all the time you need." He didn't know what he needed, or if time could fix anything. But for now, that's all he had. That night, I slept in the guest room again. The distance between our beds seemed to symbolize the distance between us emotionally. I wasn't sure we could bridge it, or even if it was worth trying. The next few days were a bit of a blur, with uncomfortable silences and awkward conversations, and the tension between us seemed to be getting worse. Emily went back to work, and so did I, but things just weren't the same. Everything felt tainted after what happened. Then, a week after the anniversary, I got a call from someone I didn't expect. Eric. He was the one who broke up my marriage, and my first instinct was to not answer. But something in his voice stopped me. He sounded regretful when he said he needed to talk to me, James. I was hesitant. I didn't want to talk to him, but I was also curious about what he could possibly have to say that Emily didn't already tell me. "Okay," I said coldly. "Say what you need to." I was sitting on the edge of my bed, gripping my phone tight. My heart was pounding as I listened to silence on the other line, waiting for Eric to say something. He was the guy who turned my world upside down. The guy sleeping with my wife. Every part of me wanted to hang up, yell, and demand answers, but I stayed quiet, waiting for him to make the first move. Finally, Eric's voice came through, soft and hesitant. "Jim, I know you don't want to hear this, but I need to talk." I let out a bitter chuckle, anger rising up inside me. "Talking's all you do. You think a phone call will fix this? You think words can change what you did? I'm not trying to fix anything. I just want to say sorry." Despite everything, a hollow laugh slipped out of my mouth. "Sorry? After everything you did, an apology's the best you have to offer?" So my wife was pregnant and our marriage was in shambles. He offered an apology, but honestly, I don't think that was going to cut it. He thought I'd just forgive him and forget about everything, but there's no way I can do that. Anyway, Eric was talking on the phone, and you know what? I could hear the regret in his voice. He knew he messed up, and I knew it too. He was trying to do the right thing, but things just didn't work out the way he planned. And then I said, "Man, it's funny how that happens. You don't mean to hurt someone, but sometimes you do anyway. What's the point of all that? It's not like it'll make things better." There was a pause on the other end, and I could hear Eric breathing heavily. It was like the weight of his guilt was crushing him. But then he said, "If you can't forgive me, that's okay. I understand. I just wanted you to know about me and Emily. We're over." That took me by surprise. I mean, we had a baby together. How could we just be over? But then he explained that they were over as a couple, but they still had a child together. It was a weird conversation, but it made me realize that even though we were going through a rough patch, I still cared about Eric. Maybe we could work things out if he was willing to put in the effort. "I get it," Eric said, his voice full of emotion. "Me and Emily broke up as soon as she found out about the pregnancy. She doesn't want to hurt anyone anymore, especially not you." I realized I crossed the line, and I'm backing off, James. I'll be out of the picture. That caught me off guard. On one hand, I was relieved about Eric leaving, but on the other, it made things more complicated. His baby was still coming, whether he was around or not. I had to think about my role in all this. "You're just leaving?" I said in disbelief. "You're abandoning your kid?" There was a pause before he spoke again. When he did, His voice sounded soft and strained. Yeah, I'll support the baby financially, but Emily doesn't want me there. To be honest, I think that's for the best. I was totally confused by what he was saying. Best for who? You think it's great for our kid to grow up without a dad? Eric paused for a second. That's what Emily wanted. She was scared of what might happen if I was around, and to be honest, I didn't want to add to her or your stress. I was in shock. Did Emily really not want him in the kid's life? Did she make major decisions about the future without talking to me? She'd already cheated on me, and now she was deciding our child's fate without considering my feelings. I tightened my jaw, trying to hold back the anger that was threatening to explode. You think you can just leave after making all those decisions? You wrecked my marriage, and now you want to walk away. I'm not leaving, Eric said carefully. I did what Emily wanted. I don't want any more trouble. I was so mad at this guy's arrogance. He thought he could just walk away, and it was all okay. You don't get to tell us what's best, I gritted out. You've done enough damage already. He looked sorry, though. I know, and I'm really sorry, he said. I should have never let things get so far, but it was too late. My life was already shattered. After a moment of silence, Eric spoke softer. James, I know how you feel. You're hurt and confused about Emily. I wanted to hang up and yell at him, but I just sat there, numb and exhausted, not knowing what to say. Goodbye, Eric. I ended the call quietly. In the silence, I realized how much the situation had hurt me. Eric was gone, but Emily's betrayal still hurt. Her apologies wouldn't fix the pain. That night, Emily walked into the spare room. Her eyes searched mine for any sign that everything was okay, but I couldn't give her that. I couldn't even look at her without feeling the weight of what she'd done. We need to talk, she said softly, perching on the edge of the bed. I didn't respond. I just waited for her to continue. She started. I talked to Eric. He's backing off. He won't be in the kid's life anymore. My fists clenched as I tried to keep my voice even. You didn't think about talking to me before you made that decision? Emily's face fell with guilt. Easy, I snapped back. How could anything be easy? You were making decisions without me, and now you're doing it again. This is not just your problem, Emily. It's ours. Tears filled her eyes, and I just couldn't feel sorry for her. I was mad and hurt because she'd made decisions that had changed our lives and left me to clean up the mess. What do you expect me to do? She asked, her voice trembling. I'm trying to make things right, but I don't know how. I shook my head, feeling the weight of all the emotions pressing down on me. I don't think there's anything we can do, I said. The days after that difficult talk kind of blended together. Emily and I kept living in the same house, but we felt more like roommates than a couple. Every day, the distance between us grew, both physically and emotionally. Every time I saw her, I remembered what happened and the pain that was still there. I went to work, came home, and retreated to the guest room without saying much. Emily tried to reach out with little gestures and quiet apologies, but I just couldn't respond. Sometimes I thought about leaving, packing up and escaping, but something kept me there. It was tied to that place and Emily, even though everything seemed falling apart. Then, one night, Emily broke the silence in a way I wasn't expecting. I might be leaving, she said softly, standing in the doorway to the guest room. I was sitting there pretending to read a book, but her voice was so steady, and I could see the pain in her eyes. What do you mean? I looked at her, confused. She stepped into the room and started fiddling with her hands. I've thought about it for a while. I just don't want to make things worse for you. My presence might be hurting you more than it's helping. Maybe I should take some time away. Her words hit me harder than I expected. A part of me had wondered if she might leave, but hearing her say it made it more real. It felt like our relationship was on the verge of breaking apart. You want to go? I asked, my voice trembling. No, 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 she said, tears welling up in her eyes. I don't want to leave you, Jim. I just don't know what else to do, man. Every time we get together, I feel so bad about hurting you, and it's killing me. Maybe if we took some time apart, maybe we could figure out what's really important to us. I wasn't sure what to say. Take some time apart? How would that help? After she told me about the affair, I felt so isolated emotionally. It didn't make anything easier, but what other choice did we have? We couldn't just stay together and live in a cycle of anger and pain. I'm not so sure taking time apart is the answer, I said softly but firmly. I just don't know. Emily nodded, wiping away her tears. Neither do I. For a moment, we just stood there, unsure of what else to say. After all these years of being married, we felt more like strangers than ever. The easy conversations and shared memories seemed so far away. I'm going to stay with my sis for a bit, Emily said quietly. She asked if I needed a break. Maybe I do. I'm not giving up on us, babe. But I think we need some clarity before we make any decisions. She sounded sincere, but it still didn't take the edge off the tension in my chest. I felt pain, regret, and doubt about what would come next. When are you leaving? I asked, my voice tight. Tomorrow, she answered. I wanted to give you some time to think. Maybe distance will help us figure out what we want. I didn't say anything. I just nodded numbly as I realized my wife was leaving our house and maybe our life forever. The next morning, I watched Emily pack her things. She didn't bring much, just a suitcase full of clothes. It all felt so surreal, like we were in some kind of nightmare. I wanted to say something, stop her, but nothing came out. Maybe she was right. Maybe space was what we needed. Or maybe this was the start of the end. As she stood there with her suitcase, she turned to me with tears in her eyes. I'm so sorry, James, she said. I mean it. I didn't mean to hurt you like that. I never wanted to. My voice was soft as I said, you did hurt me, Emily, a lot. You lied and betrayed me. I can't just forget about that. She looked down, ashamed. I know. I am so sorry. But I love you, James. Always have, always will. There were tears in my eyes as I looked at her. I wanted to forgive her, but I was so angry and hurt. I need time to think, I finally said. Emily nodded and left, leaving me alone with my thoughts. After Emily left, the house felt more empty than ever. Without her, the silence was deafening. I wandered through the halls, remembering all the good times we had, the laughs, the late-night talks, and all the plans we made for the future. It was hard, but it also reminded me that at one point, we were so happy together. My friend suggested I see a therapist, and at first I balked at the idea. I didn't want to face the emotions I was already feeling, but eventually I realized I needed help. I knew I couldn't handle this on my own. In our sessions, I talked about how I felt angry, sad, and betrayed. It was hard, but it helped me get some clarity. I realized that even though Emily made a mistake, what I did with it was up to me. If I stayed with her, if I forgave her, it was my choice. My future was still my own. About a month after Emily left, she called me. She sounded unsure, like she wasn't sure how I'd react. But I wanted to talk. I'd been thinking about it for so long and needed to put things to rest. Hey, listen, Emily said softly over the phone. I've been giving it some thought, and I want to tell you that I'm willing to take responsibility for what happened. If you want to move on and get a divorce, that's fine. I just want what's best for you, you know? Her words caught me off guard. Divorce seemed like a final step in breaking up our life together, and while it had crossed my mind, hearing her say it really made it seem real. To be honest, I'm not sure if I'm ready for that, I admitted. But I also don't think I can ever fully forgive you for what you did. I understand, Emily whispered, and for once in a while, I actually believed her. Over the next few months, I started slowly rebuilding my life after we broke up. We kept in touch, but the conversations were more distant and polite. The love we had shared was still there, but it was buried under all the hurt and betrayal we'd experienced. In the end, we just decided to go our own ways without any big fights or dramatic endings. We realized that sometimes love isn't enough to fix everything, so we got a divorce. Signing the papers was hard, but I knew it was what needed to be done. A few months later, Emily gave birth to our son. I didn't attend the delivery, but she sent me pictures, a boy with big eyes and a smile just like hers. It hurt, but it also felt like we'd finally gotten closure. Life went on. It wasn't easy, and there were times when the weight of my past still crushed me. But I learned to take a breath, let go of anger and bitterness, and focus on building a future that wasn't defined by the past. As time passed, I found my peace. If you like such stories, then be sure to subscribe to the channel. It will be the biggest support for me.